This sequence is for those of you that are ready for a nice deep stretch of the lower body and already have some moderate flexibility. You'll still want to probably have some yoga blocks handy, or maybe a pillow or cushion, a blanket or two. I'm sitting on a blanket right now. And we'll start seated. We want to make sure that the hips are as high, if not higher than the knees, and that's why I'm sitting on a blanket for this support. Let's grow tall through the spine, and then make one trunk rotation in each direction. Just one big circle one way, and then the other way. And then we'll hinge from the hips, folding forward, walking the hands out far enough to feel the outer thighs starting to get a bit of a stretch. And then we'll walk the hands back in, change the cross of the legs. Get the flesh of the bum out from behind your sit bones. Sit up tall. And once again, we hinge forward, walking the hands as far out as needed so that we start to feel a gentle to moderate stretch on the glutes, the hips, the outer thighs. And then we walk the hands back in. Then let's bring the soles of the feet together, the legs in a diamond shape here. So we're making the shape of a diamond. Hold on to the shins like handlebars, and that will help you to pull your trunk forward just a bit and then grow tall up through the crown of the head. That might be enough of a stretch like that, but if you need more, just bend the elbows so that you can hinge from the hips, folding forward. And then release back. Let's bring the soles of the feet in towards the groin. So now it's a butterfly pose. You can hold on to the shins or the ankles or the feet. We inhale, growing tall. Exhaling, let the legs relax, hinge from the hips, fold forward. You probably won't go very far because I want you to keep that spine in neutral and not round it over. Couple more breaths here. Maybe one more. And then we'll release. And then we'll lean back on the hands. Actually, I'll turn to the side to show you. We'll lean back on the hands and take it's called a figure four. We cross the right ankle over the left thigh and walk that left foot in further and further until you start to feel a stretch on this right leg. Legs side to side. We're just lubricating the joints here. And then we'll switch sides. We set the right foot down, cross left ankle over right thigh. You may need to let that right foot be further away. You may want to bring it closer in because rarely do the sides match in their flexibility. And once you're settled, go ahead and just rock the legs side to side a few times. And then uncross the legs. Let's make our way onto a tabletop position, hands and knees. I'm going to spread my blanket out and use that as some extra padding for my knees. You might like to do that as well. So we place the hands directly under the shoulders. Knees are directly underneath the hips. We'll take one spinal balance on each side just to realign the spine. Let's zip up through the core. And then extend the left leg and the right arm out and then up, hip and shoulder height, and then out again. Return to a tabletop. Keep the core zipped up. We'll send the right leg, the left arm out, up, and then out again. And then return to the tabletop. Let's tuck the toes under and then have a seat on the heels. Now, if that's uncomfortable for you, if you've got a block or a pillow, you could place that underneath your bum and make this just a little bit more of a modified version here. As you hold, rock onto your feet so that even the pinky toes get a little bit of a stretch there. It's not just the big toe. And then optional, walk the hands back behind you, either to the fingertips or tuck your bum under and then come all the way down to the palms. And as you press in with the palms and lift through the chest and lift the gaze, then you get a nice little upper chest stretch as well. If you leaned back, let's come upright and then walk the hands forward. The hips or the sit bones stay glued to the heels or as close as they'll go. Stretch the arms overhead. Feel the back getting a stretch here in the backs of the hips. And then return to tabletop. Let the tops of the feet press into the floor. And once again, set back on the heels or put a pillow there or a block there for more support. Either stay here or walk the hands back, either fingertips or the palms. If the hands are walked back, tuck the bum under. Lift the chest, lift the gaze. Enjoy this little bonus back bend. And then come forward, start walking the hands in front, just like we did a moment ago. Stretching the arms forward, the sit bones rooting down into the heels. And then back to tabletop we go. And then actually come up into a kneeling position. And then we'll come into a lunge. It's called a squared lunge. Let's zip up the core and place the left foot in front so that we've got a lot of right angles here. The heel is directly into the knee, thighs parallel to the floor. This is called a squared lunge. So we zip up the core and then press the pelvis or the trunk as a whole unit forward. You should start to feel a stretch on the top of your quad as well as the hip flexor. Now while here, let's let the arms reach up overhead. We'll get a bonus tricep stretch, letting the right elbow bend. We'll guide that in place, the upper arm right next to the ear. Keep pressing that right hip crease forward. Grow tall through the crown of the head as well as that right elbow. And then release. We'll let the hands come down either to the mat or to some blocks. So I'll demo it with the blocks here. We'll come into a hamstring stretch, or it's also called the half splits. Let that left leg straighten out, the foot flexing, and then hinge from the hips, folding forward. So if I use the blocks, I can keep my spine nice and neutral. But if I were to take the hands to the floor, I would have to round my upper back. And that's not good posture. It's not worth sacrificing the alignment of the back to get a deeper hamstring stretch. So I choose to use blocks. So if you have a chance to look in the mirror and check yourself out, do what you need to do to keep the proper posture and alignment in all of your stretches. Right, one more breath here. And then we'll come back to kneeling. We keep the core engaged. And we pick the right foot up, set it forward. So we're starting off with this squared lunge. Zipping up the core, pressing the pelvis forward as one unit. Start to feel the opening in that left hip flexor, the top of the left quad. And then if you'd like to add on, let the arms reach up overhead, the left elbow bend, and we'll guide that left arm in line with the ear. And press the hip crease forward even more. Grow tall through the crown of the head and that left elbow. And then release the hands down to the floor or to the blocks. And we'll stretch that right leg out straight. Flexing the foot, hinging from the hips, finding that hamstring stretch. Just let your breath be slow, smooth, and deep here. As if your deep breathing could somehow wash away the tension that's held in the backs of the legs. One more breath in. And then exhaling, we'll return to kneeling. And we'll take that left leg back out. Instead of stopping in the squared lunge though, we'll walk that foot out forward, the knee following it as well, so that now we're coming into a deep lunge. So the front knee is still directly over the heel, but that back knee is behind the hip, as far back as you can comfortably take it. From here, let's think of slightly tucking the tailbone under and then pressing the hips forward, and then reaching both arms up overhead. This time we'll take hold of the right wrist with the left hand. Inhale, pull that right side long. Feel the stretch along the side, elongate the spine, and then on an exhale, take a tiny little side bend to your left. So you get a bonus side stretch here, and it also deepens the hip flexor stretch, pulling it into that psoas muscle all the way up to its insertion. Now let's keep reaching up with that right arm. Send the left arm down and behind. Reach around, see if you can capture maybe the pant leg or even the outer right thigh. And as you hold on to the leg with that left hand, reach even more, maybe shift your gaze up towards your right hand as well. And then we'll walk the hands back down to the floor or to the blocks. So I'm going to put my blocks at a little lower orientation for this next stretch. And let's shift the weight forward so that the pressure comes off of the kneecap of that right knee. And then let the leg bend. maybe just leave it bent, or maybe reach around behind if you can grab hold of a pant leg, or maybe you can grab hold of your foot, pulling this into a nice, fairly deep quadricep stretch. Now, as we hold here, we don't want to collapse into that right arm. We still want to keep the spine long, keep the trunk open, keep the breath slow and steady. Now we'll release that leg back down. Let's take that front foot and start to heel toe it out towards the outer edge of the mat, and then turn the toes and the knee out towards the left corner of the mat. Now that right hand can either stay on the block, or I'm going to put it on down to the mat at this point, and then let's let that right hip drop down. The left hand can press on that left knee, and you can rock your hips side to side. Very small, very subtle movements here. Let's turn the front toes and knee back to the front of the mat, and then place both hands inside of that front foot. Now you can stay here, or you can lower down into a crocodile lunge. So I'm going to lower down on top of the blocks so that I can come on down to my forearms and yet still maintain integrity in my back, rather than rounding the upper back to make this crocodile lunge happen. We've got one more breath here. Then come back up onto the hands. We'll tuck the back toes under and lift that knee. We're going to make our way towards the wide edge of the mat. I'm just bringing the blocks right along with me, utilizing them basically as arm extenders, again, so I can protect the back while staying in a nice deep stretch. So we let the legs stay out wide here, the toes pointing towards the wide edge of the mat. Put a little bend in the knees, and then let the torso drop down. The sit bones rise up towards the sky, and then maybe the legs straighten back up. Coming into a wide leg stretch here. One more breath. And we'll lift the torso and start to make our way to the other side of the mat so that we can eventually end up in a nice, low, deep lunge here. So letting the left knee touch down. Okay, so the right knee is over the heel, but the left knee is far behind the hip. Okay, so we're starting in our lunge here. We press the pelvis forward, tuck the tailbone under slightly, and then lift the arms up overhead. We'll take hold of the left wrist with the right hand. Inhale, pull that left side long, and then exhale, take a tiny little side bend to the right. And release. We'll bring the hands on down to the mat or to the blocks and pull yourself forward just a bit so you take any pressure off of that back kneecap. And then let the back leg bend. Reach behind, see if you can take hold of a pant leg or the foot. As you hold here in this quad stretch, you press down through that left hand, but rise up through the shoulders, through the head, so we don't collapse into the support of that supportive arm. One more breath here. And then release the foot down. Let's heel toe that right foot out towards the edge of the mat, and then turn the toes and the knees out to the corner as well. Either that left hand can maybe stay on the block, or at this point I like to bring it on down to the mat so I can really let that left hip drop. And we just sort of pulse the hips side to side a few times. Then we bring the toes and knee back in line, so forward facing. Both hands are inside of that front foot. And if you like to use blocks, bring your blocks here and come on down to the forearms to find your crocodile lunge. Remember, do whatever propping you need to do to keep your back in a safe and strong alignment as you stretch through the legs. One more breath here. And then walk the hands back up. We're going to transition here into the full splits or a modified full splits. Now there's a nice little tip I have to make it accessible. If you can't do the splits, I've never been able to do them. But let's straighten that front leg out, flexing the foot. And then I like to slide my blocks underneath my right thigh, my front thigh. So I'm moving my blanket out of the way a little bit here so that I can start to scooch myself back further and further until I've got like this nice little chair that I can set my front thigh on. I can hold on to the block, and then I can find that nice posture through the back, rising through the crown of the head. Zip up the core, and then whether you're on blocks or other support or you're completely in the splits, maybe let the arms reach out. maybe even let them reach overhead. That really adds another level of stretch to that left hip flexor. And then we'll bring the arms back down. Now, how do we get out of this pose? Well, very gingerly, let's scooch the back leg in just a bit. That gives you a start, and then you can let the right leg bend and kind of make your way back into a lunge. I'm getting tangled up on my mat here. Okay, and then from here, we're going to take one more pose before we go to the other side, and it's a pigeon pose. So, to do this, I like to walk my foot. It's my right foot. I'm walking it over to the left. I've got, my arms are supporting my weight here so that my knee doesn't have any tension put on it. I have my shin parallel to that top line of the mat, and I gently set my right leg down. Now, I'm going to wedge one block underneath my right thigh. I'm going to wedge the other block underneath my left thigh. I'm going to take my blanket out here so that I can put a block under each thigh. That gives me maximum support. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this stretch. It's called a pigeon stretch. You could also, instead of having your shin parallel to the top of the mat, you can bend the leg so that the left, let's see, the right heel is underneath the left hip, and take it that way. It's a little easier stretch on the hip, but it puts just a little more tension on the knee, which I don't care for. I'd rather have the deeper stretch on the hip and not so much tension on my knee. So I keep my shin parallel to the top of the mat. So then we press in with the fingertips, find that length in the spine. I always want to keep the spine healthy. And then walk the hands forward to your desired level. Maybe that means staying on the palms. Maybe you come down on the forearms, whether it's on another block or a pillow or on the floor. Maybe you can fold all the way down. As long as you don't have to make your upper back round to make that happen, you can bring your forehead and maybe set it on your hands, or you can stack your hands into fists and then let the forehead rest. And then just see if you can settle into a few slow, long, deep, easy breaths here. Last breath here. And then start to walk your hands back in. Remove any props that you were using. And then come into a tabletop position. And if you like, let the legs stretch out one at a time before we go to the other side, because we still have the other side to work on. The splits and the pigeon stretch. So let's set up for the splits first. We come to kneeling. We've got the blocks handy if you like to use them. We'll bring that left foot forward and then start to slide that left leg out straight. And of course, you could always stay here in the half splits as well if you'd like, and simply fold forward into another hamstring stretch. Perfectly fine. Or you can start to walk that right leg back further and further. And then if you like the idea of utilizing the blocks to make this a nice modified version of the splits, go ahead and ooch your way down onto the blocks. You can hold on to the blocks if you'd like, and sometimes pressing into the blocks with the hands will help you to grow a little bit taller through the spine. And then if you feel like releasing the arms, zip up the core first. Keep that core stable and then let the arms come out. Maybe hang out there, or maybe let the arms reach up overhead. Feel that extra stretch on that right hip flexor. One more breath here. And then we'll release the arms down. Okay, so to come out of the splits, I like to pull the back leg in a little first. And then I can move the blocks out of the way so that I can utilize them to help me set up for the pigeon stretch. So we'll bring that front leg in bent. And then we'll walk the foot over towards the right side of the mat. Remember, you're supporting your weight with the hands, the arms, or the blocks so that you don't put any pressure on that knee as you lower the leg down. I'm going with the shin parallel to the mat. I'm going to wedge one block underneath my left thigh. Wedge the other block underneath my right thigh. That keeps my pelvis stable. Let's come up onto the fingertips. Elongate that spine. Always keep the spine long. And then on an exhale, start to walk the hands forward. Maybe you stay here. Maybe you put the forearms on a block, the forearms on the floor. Whatever level you need to go at to feel that great stretch on the outer thigh, hip, and glutes without compromising any posture or alignment on the back. These are great stretches to do when your body is nice and warm, and it's probably still probably at least 90 degrees out this evening. Nice warm, humid night, so my muscles are feeling like a good deep stretch. And let the breath slow down. Release any gripping you may have, whether it's in your hip or maybe it's in a totally unrelated place, like in your shoulders or your neck. What tension can you let go of? We'll take one more breath here. And then start to lift the torso, walk the hands in. You can set your blocks off to the side. Now, if you've got your blanket handy, you can bring your blanket back behind you to have a seat on. I'll spin around so I'm facing the front here, but I do want to have my blanket to sit on. So I've got that support for the pelvis. And we'll take what's called a fire logs pose here. So let's start with, it doesn't matter which leg. The leg on bottom though, the shin should be parallel to the line of your mat. It's not in like you're sitting in a crisscross position. And then the top leg, the shin goes right on top of the bottom. Now, you may need to use some blocks and prop up here, especially if you've got some fairly tight hips. So you do what you need to do to make that stretch more manageable. And you scoot the flesh of the bum out of the way. That actually helps get your pelvis in the right position that the legs can release. And then after a few breaths, you might be able to take some of the props away, or you might be like, wow, this is really hard on my knee. I want to put more props in there. It can be a block, it can be a pillow, anything that you need to make this accessible. And then if this is not enough of a stretch, just hinge from the hips, folding forward, walking the hands in front until you do feel that exceptionally yummy stretch, or the exceptionally torturous stretch, depending on how you look at it, all through the outer thighs, both hips, both glutes. And then we'll walk the hands back in and change the cross of the legs. And don't be surprised if you need a different amount of support for the second side. Again, rarely are the two sides equal in flexibility. So your shin bone is parallel to the edge, to the line of the mat, not crisscrossed. Okay, one leg on top of the other. If you need any kind of propping, go ahead and prop up, and then get the flesh of the bum out of the way. Settle in there for a few breaths. Just see how it feels. And then if you're ready for more, start to hinge from the hips. Keep the spine long. Walk the hands forward until you find that just right stretch. And then walk the hands back in. Uncross the legs. Lean back onto your arms. I'm just going to scoot back around here so I have the whole mat. Let the feet be wider than the hips with the legs bent, almost mat distance apart. And then just windshield wiper the legs back and forth. You're rocking onto one hip and then the other. This is just to sort of rinse out the joints, the muscles from all the stretching that we did. And then finally, let yourself scoot off of the blanket, kind of bring it in front of you and roll it or fold it as much as you can so you can kind of wedge it to that space where your thighs and your bottom meet. And then go ahead and lay back. Okay. So with this rolled blanket underneath the thighs, it just takes all the pressure off the low back and it softens the hip flexors. So if you can spend a moment or two here, or if you can spend even longer, allowing your eyes to close and just giving yourself permission to completely relax for a few moments.